Hello everyone, hope everybody and their families are well. I'm going to be doing my presentation on a grant-funded program that Vernon Township High School received. It was from a lot of hard work through my building principal, Dr. Pauline Anderson, and it was a pretty informative 6-hour training that benefited a lot of my colleagues. It was focused on childhood trauma. And the program it was called is the ACES program for adverse childhood experiences. And unfortunately, that falls into a multitude of categories. I'll do a brief oversight here. Again, this was a 6-hour full day training, but I went through the PowerPoint and picked out the most informative stuff that I could figure would be beneficial for this presentation. So with that, we have abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, which unfortunately was in place before the pandemic. And now that we have this situation we're in now, even though it's, some say, winding down, the trauma situations are on the rise, proving that mental health is needed now more than ever. And this kind of coincides with a lot of the mental health grants that a lot of schools are getting to put clinicians in the building to help out. So going forward with that again, bear with me here, I have all my notes. It's sponsored by the NJEA, the Healing Center and Engagement Pilot for Trauma-Informed Schools Training. So the ladies that did this were very knowledgeable, and it wasn't about informing teachers how to be mental health counselors. That was a big misconception. What it's more about is, there's plenty of students out there that are just defined and have behavior disorders because that's part of their disposition. But there's also a large portion that, due to traumatic circumstances in their lives, at home, what have you, are causing them to act out the way they do. So it's about focusing on, how we can help students to know what to look for, rather than full-blown mental health side of things. So this is from the first segment of the presentation, and the goals for that particular segment, again, there was 3 sessions that broke up to 6 hours total. So we have, again, the goals for today's session. This was part 1. I took the main key points out. Recognize how trauma can impact student behavior learning. Okay. Identify the elements of trauma-sensitive schools, trauma-informed practices in schools, and begin to consider how to apply trauma-informed policies, procedures in your school, and then attending to the needs of the adults. So along with doing what's best for our students and their families, it's also about looking out for the well-being of our colleagues, because as we're all in the same boat as new teachers in this situation, it was stressful now more than ever. So this was also implemented for us to be on the lookout for stuff as well regarding self-care, which I'll get into at the end. One of the main highlight quotes for the presentation: do the best you can until you know, but then you know better, do better. One story that resonated with me as I went through, one key video that we went over was Paper Tigers. Again, it was all trauma focused. That was a good, knowledgeable video to watch if you have time. We didn't watch the video, but that was on the list of recommendations from the presenters. So here we have a student. This is a true tutorial. They changed the name of the place, obviously. So we have Sarah, who was a student in Minneapolis, Sarah's World. And Sarah's World consisted of, unfortunately, all of these traumatic events within her home. Physical abuse, mother was mentally ill, parental addiction on both parts, mom and dad, basic needs not met, she never had food, she wasn't clean, no clothes, verbal abuse, domestic violence in the home, and specifically by the father, sexual abuse by the father, and then living in just an unsavory environment. So with that being said, there was a student that had about as horrible a situation as you can think of coming to school every day. And the reason she was part of this thing, quote from Sarah, "I love coming to school. It was the only place where I felt safe." So the presentation kind of focused on before we jump to conclusions as teachers being in a room full of kids, again, you're always going to have some of those students that they want to act that way just because, but they're always going to have also those students that don't act that way, and that's when we kind of need to set up a red flag and say, what's going on with that student? How can we help them? Okay. Sarah's story again, how her school years were the worst of times and the best of times, worst of times being her home life with the unfortunate elements that I previously mentioned. And then here was a few segments that were positive, and these were the teachers that helped Sarah out along. Social studies teacher, her English teacher, science teacher, music teacher, and the really nice lunch ladies. So these were all people that she took note of that helped her during her troubled times. Meaning that those were the teachers that, when Sarah acted out, instead of, say, doing the write-ups right to the administrator that handles discipline, these people stepped up and thought about, what's going on, how can we help her? So that's another important element that we need to kind of be aware of today more than ever before. And we need to shift our perspectives from what is wrong with the student to what has happened to the student to what is right with the student. So again, that's kind of what happened in this student's life to cause the individual to be like that. Okay, moving on. Now for the ACEs impact on school functioning. Might be hard to see, but we have a nice little graph setting here. Okay? And as you can see, our tall guy here, and I'll read that out to you, is going to be behavioral difficulties. So that was the second from the left, the highest one we had on a number 6. So again, with the trauma impacted functioning, behavioral difficulties is where it comes out. So the ACEs training was more about, let's take notice of the student. How can we help them? It's not always just behavioral defiance for no reason to get attention. There's always hidden agendas in their lives. Presentation also discussed, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We also went over that in this class. Beneficial, number top, fulfillment, and then the lower level, the physiological, with safety, love and belonging, and esteem in there. And those are things that the traumatic individuals that we're speaking of, this hierarchy needs pyramid is unfortunately not a reality in their situation. So that's where, we come in as their teachers, mentors, what have you, to make things better. They also discussed Bloom's taxonomy, how that related to trauma-impacted use. There was a lot of medical criteria. I'm not going to get into that now because it's just going to be confusing, but there was a big emphasis on biology of brain development, fight or flight syndrome. Okay, we have trauma-impacted students. Okay, fight or flight. So they're either going to fight with the teacher or they're going to leave and run the room. Okay, either way, those two elements, when we're speaking of these types of students with these issues, that's what they resort to. So there's a lot of discussion on, and again, because I'm doing this verbally, a lot of discussion in PowerPoints on neurotransmitters, dopamine, all stuff like that creates the internal workings of the brain, and how once a trauma-impacted person, has things going on in their life, things can change. Just in the same event of someone with a traumatic brain injury, how they once could be sitting in a class like us, have an accident happen to them, even as simple as a slip and fall, and then that person becomes, severely developmentally disabled. The trauma, even without a physical impact, can cause people to go awry, and that's what happens with a change of behavior. Okay. Chronic stress. Another thing they explained and went over, and I agree with, is, the toxic stress that can be brought into the classroom by these students and how it could affect us. And it was made very important that, we take, precedence in our self-care for ourselves. If we're not good, our students aren't going to be good. So the better off that we are, the more we can help them. So that was another piece of the segment that I enjoyed, again, with self-care. And one thing I would like to close on is that I also spoke in this meeting about, the traumatic situations. Now, again, this wasn't to turn teachers into clinicians, but it was just to give different amount of insight because of the level that we're at now. And I spoke at the meeting just from my mental health background and my clinical work that everything that this training proposed was true. And I gave a self-disclosure story. I was doing clinical hours at a trauma site for children, anywhere ages 3 to 18. And I'll never forget, it was my first week, and this really set the tone for a lot of the teachers that I was with. My first week I was there, I had a client, 3rd grade, and unfortunately, the little girl woke up one morning, and her mother committed suicide on the floor. As she went to go get breakfast, she found the mom, and didn't know the mom died. Sat down as mom was 10 feet away from her and ate her breakfast, and it was Fruity Pebbles. Sure enough, she ate. Mom's not moving. Her uncle came because the uncle take her to school, and that's how that child started the day. So that's about as traumatic as it could get for that little girl. So, and that was my first week. So once this, training took place, I just wanted to give some insight from myself about how an event like that stays with the student and carries on school years and beyond. So that's an example where when that little girl, she came to clinical counseling, that's where I worked with her, but it didn't stop there. We had a good rapport with the teachers, and within the lines of confidentiality, the little girl got all the help that she needed at school, and then also during her counseling sessions. So thank you for listening. I hope you got some knowledge out of this presentation. I wanted to do it kind of verbally in this format because I know everyone's getting tired of looking at, PowerPoints and what have you. But again, this was a small segment of the ACES training that my high school was awarded through a grant, and it was very beneficial. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.